So can Chelsea make it through to the Club World Cup final? To do so, they're going to have to break the heart of Thiago Silva and going to have to beat another Brazilian side just after getting through against Palmeiras. Obviously, the struggle we had against Flamengo earlier in this tournament. It's going to be another intense game. I think a lot of those things that we've seen so far against Brazilian opposition, I think will be repeated here. It's a semi-final. It's a humongous game for Fluminense. It's a big game for Chelsea as well. And I think that the big thing about this game for me is just seeing a continuation of what we have against Benfica, against Palmeiras that really encouraged me. We'll get into some of that in this preview. This is my predicted lineup, my thoughts, my feelings, everything in between about the semi-final at MetLife Stadium. Please do get involved in the comments below. What predicted lineup would you like to see Enzo Maresca field in this semi-final? Because there are some selection headaches. There are new suspensions, some big suspensions for this game, and how Chelsea deal with a side who have really beaten the odds in this tournament and have really thrived off of being the underdogs in a lot of the games they have played, and they will be looking to very much take that role again and upset Chelsea in the semi-final. So obviously we know some of the selection headaches for Enzo Maresca. No Levi Colwill, no Liam Delap, but there is the returning Moises Caicedo, which is huge. There is a big question mark over who starts up top for Chelsea. That in itself is a very interesting question, given the way Maresca dealt with the attack against Palmeiras in the quarterfinal, and whether he'll repeat that, and some of the other things around the team that I'll get to. Thiago Silva, there's no getting around it, and it is nice, but obviously, there is some emotion and kind of bittersweet kind of feeling to it, because if Chelsea are to get to the Club World Cup final, they're going to have to finish the dream of Thiago Silva getting to another Club World Cup final. And just wonderful to see Thiago still performing at a high level, playing in huge, not only club games, but international games as well. And, one of those incredible players. I mean, listen, we on the show, we did a lot when Thiago left about how much I think he meant to Chelsea, how wonderful of a talent he was, what an incredible signing, how valuable he became. But still, I mean, there is probably some feeling amongst Chelsea fans that we lack the experience and know-how and the wisdom of Thiago in our current defence. Even though I do think there is positivity around the current players we have in defence. But listen, trying to replicate and trying to find another Thiago Silva is basically impossible. But how he does in this game, obviously Chelsea will have to get through him and have to get through Fluminense, who defensively have been very good in this tournament, and offensively too have some very attack-minded and effective players. Arias is top for chances created in this tournament. Fabio, the keeper, has kept 3 clean sheets. Only more than that is Gianluigi Donnarumma for PSG. He also has the 3rd highest save percentage. And Hercules has come off the bench twice in this knockout stage to score 2 goals. So, we look at tournament football, we look at how it's different to kind of your regular league season. And when you have players like that in form, who can very much be an effective tool even from the bench, that could be quite devastating for Chelsea in this game. So that is a threat you have to absolutely look at. In terms of their head coach and just the story of Fluminense, I mean, it's quite interesting. I was reading a piece from AP. Renato Portaluppi, who is the head coach, really has transformed them from relegation battlers to giant killers in about 3 months, which of course sets us up for this semi-final. En route to this, they've beaten Inter Milan, Al Hilal in the quarterfinals. How dynamic and how expressive Portaluppi is on the touchline. He was kind of at the end of the Al Hilal game, like arms out wide, just like looking up to the sky in celebration. So that passion, that emotion that we've seen from Brazilian teams so far, you can very much expect it. And those kind of waves of pressure and that momentum shift and sometimes a little bit of chaos within the games is something that Chelsea have to anticipate. They've experienced it a couple of times now in the 2 situations we've had against Flamengo and against Palmeiras. 2 different outcomes really. Most recently, of course, against Palmeiras, I think we dealt with that chaos well. I think Maresca proactively changed the game and Chelsea were able to get on top again and eventually win against Palmeiras. Flamengo, we didn't deal with it well. So, those fluctuations, those changes within the game, Chelsea go 1-0 up and maybe the game and momentum shifts. We know how quickly things in this tournament can shift in another direction. So I think that is something Chelsea have to be wary of. I think from a tactical point of view, JJ Ball from Tifo from The Athletic done a lot of great analysis on the zone about this. And people have been talking about Chelsea's shape, particularly their shape against Palmeiras, sort of this 3-6-1 shape. that Chelsea have been operating with, where you have the back three of in the last game, Cucurella, Colwill and Chalobah. Then you have Malo Gusto inverts into central midfield. We had Andre Santos kind of as the holding player. Fernandes will at times drop a little bit deeper, what we know has the freedom and license to move up. And then you've got Nkunku on the left, Delap as kind of your focal point, Palmer though occupying that number 10 space, and Pedro Neto out wide. And how fluid it was, and how comfortable Chelsea looked, how effective they looked at being able to break through Palmeiras' press, being able to open up space, most notably and most importantly for Cole Palmer. You know, if you have situations like that where Cole Palmer can operate and can have the freedom and can have the expression and can be as effective as he was in that first half against Palmeiras, you know, Chelsea become a completely different animal in these type of games. You know, tight games can turn massively in Chelsea's favour. And I just think that fluidity is interesting to look at, and how Maresca and his team are maybe going to evolve into the second season. Because what it means is, you know, we have debates about, are you starting a 3 at the back, are you starting a 4 at the back? But really, we know the team can shapeshift in that aspect, and having players who are comfortable enough to do that, I think, is really important. And Chelsea have a lot of players who I think can do that, who can shapeshift, who can move from a 4 to a 3, can move into central midfield during phases of play, and players in the attacking sense as well, who are dynamic, who are versatile. I think that's obviously a very important thing, and why we're seeing certain players being recruited at the current point. So in terms of my lineup, I think that keeping a majority of the players who have played recently, I think that's pretty obvious. I think, you know, certain names you expect to be starting for Enzo Maresca at this point, he relies heavily on them. I think in terms of getting around some of those bans that we've seen, I think the most notable one and most devastating really is Levi Colwill. I spoke about this in my review of the Palmeiras game. I think, you know, Levi has been incredible. I think the way he's grown, he really has gone up to another level. Not having him, especially in the current system, is obviously a little bit negative and a little bit of a downer. But I do think that, you know, if you have Tosin Adarabioyo, I'm not entirely sure Benoit Badiashile is ready to come back for this game. There are players that can come back into it, but maybe not in the same way, the same comfort that Levi has to play as a left centre-back, to play as a centre in a back three as well. That is something you have to factor in. But having Caicedo back for this game obviously is huge. You know, such a huge player for Chelsea, and it was wonderful we're able to get through the Palmeiras game without such a big player. So I think Rob Sanchez will start in goal. If Reece James is fit, I think this is another big question mark, because Maresca didn't want to risk him. Chelsea didn't want to risk him. I completely understand that. It's been a short turnaround from Palmeiras to this game, and I said this in my Palmeiras review. Are you going to risk him in such a short turnaround? Are they going to wait a little bit longer? And if Chelsea can get through to the final, then you maybe bring him back. But I think if James is ready to start and willing to start, I think he starts this game. It's a big game. It's a semi-final. Reece should be starting. And whether he's starting, you know, I think it may look like where he's playing as a right back, but I think, as we've seen in recent times, he'll play as a right centre back, and I think he'll be joined in that back three by Tosin Adarabioyo and Trevor Chalobah. I think Trev can very naturally move on to the left. We know Trev's versatility. I've said this consistently, why he's such a valuable squad player is that you can move him around. You know he can play really well as a right centre back, even the centre of a back three. And as well, when you have Marco Correa two, you've got two players there in James and Cucurella who can move into a back three. So as we saw with Malo Gusto against Palmeiras, Gusto would move forward, Cucurella would shift into the back three naturally, and vice versa. More so Cucurella, but at least with James and Cucurella, you've got two players there who I feel more comfortable to do that. I think in this scenario, as we saw against Benfica, it's more likely that Cucurella shifts a lot more forward for Chelsea. He got a lot more forward in the game against Benfica, and that nearly opened up Benfica on a number of occasions. Caicedo will obviously come back in central midfield here. I think that's obvious. Enzo Fernandez too, I think, will start. Here's where it gets interesting. I mean, does Andre Santos keep his place? The original intention by Enzo Maresca in that game against Palmeiras was to have Malo Gusto at right back and Reece James in central midfield. I hope, and pointed this out, I hope that's a turning point by coincidence. My fear is, if it's not, Chelsea going to walk into similar problems in the long term, because I just don't think it should be used in that way. My hope is Santos' maturity in that performance has given Maresca enough evidence to say, I can rely on this guy in pressurised situations against another Brazilian side. But this time, you've got the ability to play Andre Santos in a more attack-minded role because you've got Moises Caicedo. And I think the thing is with how I've seen Chelsea's attack be constructed in recent games, when you've got Nkunku who will start, but he'll shift onto the left. You've got Joao Pedro who can be a bit of a hybrid player. You've got a number of players who can operate in different ways. Maybe you do have the license to play a number 8 there, like Andre Santos, and he'll be able to get the license to move forward. So I'd be intrigued to see how Santos works. It may be more of a role that I think people come accustomed to him playing, especially for Strasbourg and what he could do at Chelsea. Neto, I think, also will start. He has been a big player. And I think, given what's going on with Noni Madueke, I think it's kind of quite obvious that this is now our first choice right winger. If you play one, it's going to be Pedro Neto. And to be fair, he's had a really positive tournament. I think there was a moment in the game against Palmeiras that should have been capitalised on. He scored, obviously, a couple in the group stage. I think Pedro Neto will continue to start games. If he's in the right state of mind. Just because he was in the right state of mind to play against Palmeiras, he may not be for this game. And that's completely understandable. And then seeing who would play in that role. With Noni Madueke, who came off the bench and obviously is being linked away, will he'll still get minutes? We know Nkunku is getting minutes at the moment. So just because a player may not have a future at Chelsea, Maresca is still using them in this tournament. Cole Palmer, I think, should play that kind of free role, that number 10 role, with the free back system that Fluminense play, with the way they're going to look to counter Chelsea, look to restrict space. He needs that freedom. He needs the ability to drop into those pockets and hopefully open up space and receive the ball, turn and try and carve open opportunities. Because Palmer at his best, that's where he should operate. And I think hopefully that will be a continuation from Palmeiras. Then we get into the striker position. There's no Liam Delap. So it then fundamentally comes down to two names for me, and that of course is Nicolas Jackson or Joao Pedro. My initial instinct is Joao Pedro, purely because I think it was such a big sign of the confidence and maybe just his preference that against Palmeiras, the game's literally at 1-1, he turns to the player who's barely been in training, and that was Joao Pedro, and Joao Pedro looked very positive. And I think that fluidity, we speak about this fluid, system. I think obviously Pedro, you can see him adapting and working very well within that system. I also think, to give credit to Jackson, I think he can also work well in that system. We know Jackson can drop deep, he can go wide. I mean, there is to try and cast out Jackson now as kind of the bad guy or someone who is so limited within his game. I just think it's unfair. It's not a true reflection on his Chelsea career. However, just based on what I saw against Palmeiras, I think you have to take that into consideration. This is a big moment, I think, in the next few weeks, probably. I know whatever happens in this game in the final, it's huge for Nicolas Jackson because, does Nicolas Jackson have a future at Chelsea? That will still remain a question for the rest of this transfer window, or at the very least until the start of the season, 25-26 in the Premier League, and we get a firmer indication of where he sits within Enzo Maresca's plans. Because at the moment, you can still sort of see a scenario playing out where Madueke goes, sure, some other goes, like Nkunku goes as well. But still, Jackson might be a name that Chelsea feel they can get a decent fee for, with other striker and attacking options still out in the market for Chelsea to go for. That, I don't think we can completely rule out that situation. I know there's been reporting today that Jackson wants to remain at Chelsea, but just because that gets said, that doesn't mean a deal isn't possible between now and the end of the transfer window. So if Jackson does start, he really needs a big performance, and he really needs to start putting a run of performances together. Puts the bad moments in recent months behind him, because it's not just the frustration people have with his end product that's really soured his kind of reputation at Chelsea in recent months for many people. It's obviously those 2 moments of petulance that nearly cost Chelsea a lot. I mean, Chelsea have got away twice with Jackson's petulance, because against Flamengo, that red card, in the end, Chelsea losing that game actually worked out better in terms of our side of the draw, but obviously it was frustrating to lose that game. And basically ended the game at that point. And obviously Newcastle back in April or early May, when he gets that red card and it nearly cost Chelsea everything in their season. He's got away with it twice, and I think people have already made their minds up, especially with Joao Pedro coming in, with Liam Delap coming in, who obviously can't play in this game, and the potential of other players gaining minutes this season, with Jamie Gittins arriving as well, Esteval coming. Jackson has to, some of these players I think have to remind Maresca probably and others that they're still here and there's still a chance for them to improve. So if Jackson starts, he has to have a big performance. He simply has to have a big performance. I think anything other than that, And people will make their minds up. People have already made their minds up on Nicolas Jackson, where he still has a future at Chelsea. Please do let me know in the comments below what you think about the Jackson situation. And would you start Joao Pedro? You know, do you still like him as kind of an impact player? Does Maresca still see him as an impact player? Because even though he came off the bench, does Maresca still look at him as someone who I'd prefer to have as an influencer, kind of game changer from the subs bench, maybe not ready to play 90 minutes in my system, and Jackson is that player that starts this game, takes up the bulk of the minutes, and then I can bring Pedro off the bench. And I don't even have to bring Pedro off the bench for Jackson. I could bring him off the bench for someone else because we know he can maybe play off a striker. So there are a lot of options. There's a lot of fluidity at the moment. That is my starting 11 for the semi-final. I really want to hear your thoughts about this game. Do you agree, disagree, your feelings, fears, hopes for this game? Please let me know in the comments below, and I'll be back again very, very soon. All the best.